Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games, the Week in Games. This is our first Week in Games of 2019, and yes, it has been almost a full month into the new year before I actually came out with one of these. I do apologize for that. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and a great New Year's. Mine was very, very interesting, and I will just leave that at that. Although one of the highlights this year, earlier in the month, was being able to go have some quality gaming time with some of my favorite buddies at Zulu's. Met a couple friends, hung out with one of the guys that used to go to the board game convention I used to run up at Cedar Springs Camp. We had a good time. We played two games that were that I keep in mind. One was The Estate, which I thought was okay, decent, definitely wouldn't play it with less than 4. And the other one was Tavarua, which is a very curious surfing game that I was a little dubious about at first. There are some nuances and some details to it, but once the game flows like a wave, it actually was entertaining. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find it. It's pretty much out of print. It's from the guy who did Zia Legends of a Drift System and one of his earlier titles, and I was amazed at it. I hope that eventually he does a reprint of it, because I would like to pick it up. I think it was great to play and very thematic. Surprisingly thematic. If you can imagine a game that really feels like it simulates surfing, this did it. No complaints. So anyway, let's get to the news. Alright, well, the big news for me is Western Legends has a new Kickstarter expansion going on right now called Ante-Up. The original was very thematic as well, but it didn't grab me as much as I'd hoped, probably because I wasn't playing it with very many other players, and it seemed a little bit too loose in the sandboxy area for me to feel, yay, huzzah. But at the same time, I certainly saw solidity and just a quality sandbox experience, particularly at higher player levels. So I'm curious enough to go ahead and back the expansion. It adds basically more of everything, more content of all kinds. Not sure if it really addresses lesser player counts, or even if it was an issue because maybe other people liked it at 2 or 3 players. Definitely would want to play it with more. So, but I expect the extra content hopefully will pique my interest again, and we'll get it to the table sometime next year, or late this year, I believe. So, next, Stonemaier Games, in their usual fashion, has produced a blockbuster, massive, gotta-have now game called Wingspan, which is already unavailable, which is for bird enthusiasts. It basically simulates a bird enthusiast that's attracting the best birds to your preserve. So I like the theme. The artwork looked incredible. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. If anybody's played it and has some thoughts, by all means, leave them in the comments. I will try and get on the next train to Birdville. I'm not necessarily a big aviary guy, although every year my wife and I on New Year's Day will always watch The Big Year, which is Steve Martin, Owen Wilson, and Jack Black in a strange mix of characters that works well in a not too comedic kind of comedy that I thought that we just adored, and we watch it every year because it's The Big Year. Anyway, that's it for that. Finally, there is a game coming out called Proving Grounds, and it's from a designer with an impressive pedigree for solo games, and I'm not going to pass this one by without a hard look, because it's a solo real-time dice game that's right up my alley. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, you might look into Proving Grounds. And with that, let's get to my question of the week. So, question I get is, how do you have different expectations for one game versus another? It was a discussion I had recently locally, because it seemed like the premise was I was giving certain companies a pass for mistakes or errata or instruction details and stuff, when I wasn't so much other companies. And I thought that was absurd at first, but I did think about it, and I think, yeah, there are times when I tend to lean to be more forgiving for some companies or complexities of games, is actually, I think, is the trigger point here, because I play a lot of GMT games, Dan Versen games, some war games that have very detailed, very nuanced, very precise instruction manuals. 20, 30 pages of rules, lots of contextual rules, and those, I am in awe of people who can really put together that detail of rules and do it well. I think GMT has gotten just better and better about that with their games, Coin Games and all the others in that line. and it's just gotten better and better. And so I tend to be a little more forgiving, I think, to games that have a lot of rules, because there's, I mean, the more amount of rules you make, the more likely it is that maybe something isn't precisely described, or there's might be a slight ambiguity. And I'm a lot more forgiving for that than, say, some game that's very simple, but the rules are loosey-goosey, or terms are like intermixed. They mean the same thing, but they're described differently. Things like that, where, you know, just a detail-oriented person could pick those apart in no time. And so maybe that's why I set different expectations or allowances for some companies, more others. Should I? I don't know. I think I have a tendency to be more meritocratic towards people. If you put in a lot of work on a manual and I can see that you busted butt on it, and there's just a ton of details and a ton of information and a ton of examples and all that, yeah, I'm going to definitely cut you slack over a simple game that has, you know, a two-page manual and they still mixed up terms and didn't quite explain everything and such. Not that any company's perfect at it, but maybe that's why. So anyway, what are your expectations of games? Do you think it should be universal? Or do you think that maybe some, because they're given a lot harder of a road to, say, for example, Fire in the Lake from GMT is a lot more intricate of a game than, say, Glenmore or Quadropolis, as an example. So anyway, that's it for the question of the week. Now let's get to my 3 games. All right, game number 1. Court of the Medici is a 50-card game that's probably one of the meanest, nastiest, stabbingest games that you can pull off with 50 cards. It's been about 10 years that I've had this, and I always take it just as sort of an afterthought. But it is mean, man. It is nasty. It's crazy how you could take 50 cards and just go to town and just make it into what feels like a war of attrition. So if you're into that, this is kind of a keeper I just keep around. It's so small that you can fit it in pretty much anything. So, and when you're done with those bloody battles of attrition, then we go on to Dice Hospital, which is a game I received in a contest that I won back in September of 2017, and through a set of mysterious circumstances and stuff didn't work out and just crazy times. It took a long time, but I finally got this right before this Christmas from the company that published it. And so there will be a review of this coming out in the next couple weeks, and we'll find out whether it's up to snuff. Was it worth waiting 15 months for? I think we'll find out. And last but not least, definitely not least, in the art department, Everdell. I had a chance to set this up, and I am boggled by the Grim Forest had great components. I remember that game. It was, where it just pieces just looked nice. It just nice and fancy and whimsical and fantastical. Everdell is no different. Not only does it have great components and a tree that you construct on the fly each game, totally superfluous but totally awesome. It also has card art that's just vivid and rich. What you see on the box is everything you're seeing in the game for artwork and style. Whether it's a good game or not, well, maybe I'll do a review of that too. I certainly liked the first playthrough, but I need a few more playthroughs to really understand what I feel about the game. So that's my 3 games of the week, and finally let's get to Tim's Tantrum. Get off my land. Okay, another discussion, which didn't get heated, but it was definitely intense, was a discussion this week regarding playing a game once and then positing feedback on that one play. And on the one extreme, we have that's incredibly dangerous to do that if you have, because you don't really know all the game yet, and most games you haven't really played through. That one experience might be skewed. You haven't had enough sample points to really understand. That's the one extreme. The other extreme is, why not? Why not say what you feel? Like, many people can just figure out from a first play whether they're really going to like it or not. So we have these 2 extremes, and I usually like to take the middle one, although I still am torn because I can see both sides. I think part of it comes down to how authoritative you present yourself when you're giving that feedback on a single play. For example, there were some cases where a single playthrough posited all kinds of feedback about a game, lots of details on how, you know, with an absolute thumbs down veto on it. Unfortunately, reading through those, there were many mistakes in that playthrough that really just threw out the window any authenticity that particular individual would have for the game, because they weren't playing it right, they weren't following, they were just kind of seemed like deer in the headlights playing it through. In that case, their feedback, it's not that their opinion is bad or wrong or they didn't like it, but to me, if I was to do that, it would be more like, hey, this was my first playthrough. These are some observations that I noted, like leaving the door open to the fact that subsequent playthroughs on a generally average developed game are going to probably bring to light reasons, rationales, you know, different strategies to counter things that you might have felt were unbalanced, etc. It's kind of all about whether it's conversational or it attempts to be dictatorial. And I find that, you know, first impressions are great. Review impressions are also great, and I think if those are noted very clearly and stanced very differently, then I think it's not necessarily a problem, because it is important. You know, games proffer opinions. Like any form of entertainment, you're going to find people that loathe something, that love something, and those people are going to be, they could be good friends, like in this case, two good friends, two different opinions, and such. So, but anyway, what any thoughts people have on that, by all means post them, but that's not so much of a tantrum, I guess. I think it's more of like a counter tantrum. I guess I'll have to think through that segment a little more closely next time. Anyway, that's it. I hope you have a great rest of your January, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.